In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
It is a basic tenet of Christian practice that it is only as we give up that God can fill us back up. This is what Jesus is essentially telling his disciples, that the degree of their obsession with their possessions is directly proportional to a healthy relationship with God. Possessions becoming a huge distraction from our time with God. When Jesse and I were first married, we lived in a 780 square foot house trailer. It was spectacular. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen, but no closets. Which in those days was about all we had. One set of clothes was in the washing machine and the other we were wearing. But somehow, little by little, we accumulated both children and possessions, and we needed larger and larger houses. American sales acumen convinced us we needed more things. But in those days, work and family did not give us a whole lot of time to spend driving all over town finding and obtaining all that dazzled. But then along came Amazon. And it could provide us with a click the very next day those things we thought we needed and things we never dreamed about needing at all. No longer having to drive around to find things. 1,600,000 packages a day Amazon sends out to satisfy our human desires. Storage units now are as numerous as houses to contain all that glitters. Last summer, Jesse and I reversed this trend in our lives toward needing more space and moved into a 2,300 square foot house with literally no place to put a lot of what we already owned, requiring endless trips to Goodwill, certainly no space for anything more, mandating our new household rule: if anything new comes in, something old must go out. Our current discussion is about what to do with all our Christmas stuff, all our Christmas ornaments. I am trying to talk Jesse into letting me build a hidden closet in this one part of the house into which we can roll our fully decorated Christmas tree into the closet and close the door. And then when Christmas comes, we can roll it back out, and the Epiphany roll it back in, taking care of the storage and the effort problem. In looking for solutions to the human condition of being possessed by our possessions, I found a great YouTube video where we go to find the answer for all things, called The Story of Stuff. It's very interesting. It makes some interesting observations. It talks about an economy depending on increased production will need to employ increased workers, which naturally increases consumption, requiring an increase in production, which will need increased workers, an endless cycle of more stuff to possess us. The basic story of stuff, it makes the point, is that prosperity and consumption make us happy, requiring us to accumulate more and more stuff to stay happy and to prove our self-worth. But there is a problem with this treadmill. Not everyone is happy. Some harbor feelings of envy, even resentment, that can actually lead to revolutions. Also, not surprisingly, once people have met their basic needs, more stuff does not produce more happiness. Stuff is not a big point on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Then there is the problem of an overstuffed planet, and where we put all our used up stuff, not to mention all the cardboard from the shipping boxes Amazon uses on a daily basis. St. Luke uses this consumption, happiness, disappointment treadmill to frame missing the best of all gifts, which is God's salvation. Last week I preached on the rich fool. This is a whole series in Luke's gospel, whose increased production led to increased consumption. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry, he said, rich toward himself and poor toward God. His soul was required, and all that he had accumulated was lost. In the verses right before this morning's gospel, Jesus says, O men of little faith, do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be anxious of mind. For all the nations of the world seek these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Indeed, seek his kingdom, and these things shall be yours as well. So what is the antidote to fear, this anxiety, that we comfort falsely with material goods? Well, our gospel this morning follows right upon the last lesson. Fear not, little flock, Jesus says, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Jesus did not say, fear not, go shopping, introducing what we call retail therapy. Rather, he made the point that we really do not fear when we have put our hearts in the right place, by putting our treasure first in the right place, because that puts us right in the very near kingdom of God. Those who are consumed with overconsumption, to distract them from fear and anxiety, to find happiness, to show off their success, have built up, Jesus is saying, treasure on earth. Those who put their trust in God's provision to remove their fear and provide their daily need, to find happiness in kingdom values and kingdom life right now, have confidence in their treasure that they have put in heaven. Of course, this was not new to those who were listening to Jesus any more than it is new to us. The Lord told Abram, fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward will be very great. The psalmist in this morning's psalm thus prayed, happy is the nation whose God is the Lord, happy the people he has chosen to be his own. Like knowing we ought to exercise and eat healthy food, we know as well that making our heart's priority, figuratively and actually storing up treasure in heaven, is exactly and how the true joys of God are to be found. Jesus said, sell your possessions and give to the needy. Our possessions used for the purposes and glory of God will bring us the greatest joy and fulfillment and confidence. Our possessions used to satisfy our fallen vision of happiness will always leave us hungry an hour later like high-carb food. This morning at the 8 o'clock service, there was this very patrician-looking gentleman sitting back about 3 rows who I'd never seen before. I thought it's somebody from the Episcopal Church trying to see what I'm saying. Well, he ended up being quite a nice guy. And he actually serves in a church. He's not a minister, but he runs youth programs in a church in Lexington, Massachusetts. And it was not far from where I grew up in Needham, Massachusetts. I used to play soccer on the town square in Lexington. And he told me that the greatest thing that he was able to do with the teenagers was to take them into the inner city of Boston and have them help winterize homes for the winter for poor people in Boston, in the city. And he said, it's just like you said in your sermon. They committed their time and their effort to spend the day in Boston helping the needy, and their hearts followed. Their hearts followed that. And I said, well, that's amusing, because when I was a teenager, every fall our youth group leader, our priest, would take us into the inner city in Boston to seal up houses for the winter so the poor wouldn't lose all the heat through the single pane glass. And you know what? My heart followed doing that. My heart followed. Jesus says, where we put our treasure, our heart will follow. Alistair McGrath, in his book Mere Discipleship, puts it this way: Christian discipleship is not about mastering God, but being mastered by God. It is not as an act of craven intellectual submission to someone we fear, but as an act of joyful intellectual enrichment arising from the expansion of our rational and imaginative capacities in response to a captivating vision of God, which ends up setting us free. Jesus simply wants us to have the kingdom where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. And yet the thieves are approaching, and the moths are destroying right now. The problem is undeniable, just as Jesus warned that it would be. Instead of preparing ourselves for and tending to kingdom business, reading our Bibles, worshiping God, putting our shoulders to the plow of kingdom work, we have allowed ourselves to be distracted by our full barns, our houses full of stuff. And the consequences, the crippling effect of this distraction, be it our stuff or our activities or our other commitments, has the church literally hamstrung in its effectiveness, distracted from the kingdom's mission to the world. The Federalist published an article this week contrasting the treasures of the kingdom with the consequences of the world. It was entitled, "Who Killed God? Family and Community." And it is now killing us. We killed God, family, and community, and now it is killing us. The article makes the point that we used to know we had meaning because we had a mother and a father who told us so, of a God who loved us, a community that needed us. But by benign neglect and misdirected by priorities, by succumbing to worldly alternatives and distractions, we have greatly weakened the very things that make people truly happy. Family, community, spiritual well-being, the primordial building blocks, the article says, of human happiness. And the primary result of misplacing our attention is the great damage it has done to the human heart. Half of America is on antidepressants. We feel isolation, depression, anxiety, despondency, increased drug abuse, and even death. The author writes, "We talk about gun violence. Just about no one talks about these other root causes. It's not as if we haven't had lots of semi-automatic weapons in this country for decades," he writes. He said, "In fact, when I was in high school, my classmates regularly kept rifles in their gun racks in the school parking lot." Wasn't that true for a lot of you all? Certainly was true in the South for me. He makes the point that what has changed is that we have discarded those regulating social institutions that help people understand their value and their place in the world, that has resulted in a well-documented epidemic of despair wherein people have no place, no purpose, no intrinsic value. And here we must go back to the words of Jesus. Stay dressed for action. Keep your lamps burning. Be like men. And in a real sense, a lot of this is a man's responsibility in a family. With lamps burning, we must not lose sight of the church's sole ability to revitalize our families, our communities, our religious effectiveness. The Federalist article described the world's desperate need. Here's how it describes it. We require deep and meaningful connection. We need family and community. We are desperate for life and the love of others. We need help to navigate the world, to help us see that we have purpose, to help us understand right from wrong, to imbue us with a sense of moral clarity. But when we passively undermine the church's ability to address these needs by not putting in our share of energy and commitment, by not making our participation consistent, our presence dependable, and yes, not putting in our treasure into this very institution that instills values, morality, and redemption? When we don't do these things, despair and immorality, desperation, and evil will win the day every time. I truly believe with all my heart that Jesus and his church is the single means to fulfill the hearts of fallen humanity. John Stonestreet wrote this week that we need to be about cultivating young people. Listen to this phrase. I love this phrase. It's so important. To teach them about their fallen nature, how to choose love over hate and courage over violence. He goes on to say, until we face the fact that the root of our problem lies here, the fruit will continue to be bitter. Unless we rebuild the institutions of civil society that cultivate young people, there is no way forward. We all know this to be absolutely true. And we know we simply need to get about doing it, putting our time and our treasure where we want our hearts to be, for our own sakes, for our children's sake, for the sake of the world, a sign of the kingdom, to make our community full of kingdom citizens. It is what Jesus is expecting of us as individuals and as a parish church. And the pleasure in doing such is greater than all our stuff and all our activities to squench our fear and our anxiety combined will ever provide. Amen.